first NEDIC for having me. It's really great to be here. Just throw it out there, I love food puns, so drawing your attention to the screen, it kind of relates to the topic of eating disorders. So, do you want to talk about it? It's not your problem. So I feel like that's something that we can relate to eating disorders a lot. We want to talk about them and we need to talk about them, but I think there's a big gap still from what we know about eating disorders and how we're translating that into the community, into making a difference, into making an impact. We have made strides, as everyone else mentioned, but there's definitely still a long way to go. So just a little bit about myself. I struggled with anorexia nervosa for about 7 years of my life. It's really hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment when it started. I remember as a child, I was a little bit on the chubby side. There were different messages I was receiving about food. There was no dessert if you didn't complete your homework, or no cookie because it's going to make you fat, or the family is dieting because we need to lose weight. And combined with, I would say, already being a little bit insecure about my weight compared to my peers, I think it definitely fueled the downward spiral from there. One moment that I particularly remember when I was in grade 8 was I had like a huge crush on this boy. And when you're in grade 8, I'm like, right? Crush. You're all like, you're in your own little land. So I asked my friend, can you go ask so-and-so if he has a crush on me? And so she went and she asked him, and she was like, oh, do you have a crush on Marina? And he said, oh, no, I can never have a crush on Marina because her thighs are too fat. And I remember hearing that and just it's like something hit me. And if before I felt insecure because maybe I felt bigger than everyone else, now I just felt like I was pathetic, like I was a loser, like these thighs just had to go. So I think I'm not sure if it started from there, but that definitely fueled it to continue. And I started restricting just what we would call a diet. And if there's one thing you can probably take away from this, it's diets don't work, and there's no such thing as a diet that can last you a full lifetime. It's a healthy lifestyle, that's the best way to go. But anyway, I started restricting desserts, which didn't really catch the attention of anyone. Sometimes my parents would say, oh, you're not having dessert today. And I would say, oh, I started to notice, and I started to notice, and it felt good, as it would feel for anyone who feels like they need to lose weight or wants to lose weight. You feel that sense of accomplishment. But for me, it continued. And I felt like, well, heck, if I can lose 5 pounds by just dessert, what would happen if I cut out, lunch? Lunch was the easiest meal to skip, I'm sure, as you mentioned your son, because you're at school and nobody really notices. So I began to skip lunch at school. A lot of the times I threw my meals out. A lot of the other times I just told my friends that I had a really generous mom and that she packed me 3 lunches for one day. And I know it's funny, but it worked. And that's how I got rid of my lunches. I would go home and I would eat dinner. And again, I continued to lose weight throughout high school until one day I realized, well, I could probably start skipping dinner now. So I started staying after school for some things or coming home and just getting rid of my dinner somehow. And looking back now in hindsight, sometimes we think, how could we not have caught this? How could your parents not have seen this? But the eating disorder is very smart. Eating disorders are not mental illnesses, and they will not thrive if they are out in the open. They thrive in secrecy because in secrecy, that's where it's easier to isolate. That's where it's easier to do the things that the eating disorder wants you to do. So anyway, I continued to lose weight. It got particularly bad in my first year of university. By then I was going to school from the morning and not returning until night. So lots of opportunities to skip all my meals. I was eating just a very, very small thing in the morning, going all day without anything, not even water, and then a very small thing again at night. And I got very ill very quickly. By the end of my first year of university in April, I was down to 55 pounds, and I was dying. I could not move. I remember trying to walk up and down the stairs or even across campus, and I literally could not walk. My legs were so weak, I was dragging my legs. At nighttime, when I would come to go up to my bed, my mom and dad had to carry me upstairs. And I know that their hearts were probably aching. They're up here, by the way. My mom's recording. Because it's difficult. It's difficult to see someone you love or a child go through this experience and just not know what to do. And there were a lot of times where my parents did approach me and they told me, something's not right, we have to do something. We have to go to therapy, we have to go to the doctor. And I was resistant. I was very resistant. I was stubborn. The eating disorder was way stronger than anyone could have imagined. And it had been so entrenched in me that at this point, nothing would work. The end of my first year of university, the last day of my exams, my father came home, he's a family physician, and he hit me with, if you don't go to the hospital now, we are going to force you to go to the hospital. And I mean, I was like, you can't force me to the hospital. And then I found out that you actually can. You can force someone to go to the hospital if they're a danger to themselves. And I honestly thought they were pulling my leg, but they weren't. It was real business this time. And eventually, I was like, well, heck, I'll just go to the hospital, I'll eat a couple of meals, show the nurses and the doctors that my parents have no idea what they're talking about, and it will all be good. So I did go to the hospital. We went to the emergency room. The nurses there weighed me because, they were like, well, what's the problem? And my mom, I remember my mom was like, this girl is not eating her food. And the nurse looked at me and she's like, okay, get on a scale. And I did. It read 53 pounds that day. And the nurse literally, on the spot, paged the doctor and she's like, you need to get here right away. We got admitted, I say we because my family never left my side, got admitted to the emergency room, stuck an IV in, got the IV hydration. And this whole time I literally thought that I'd just be able to eat in front of the doctors and nurses. And even when they brought my meal in the emergency room, I couldn't. I had planned to, but I couldn't. I tried, but the eating disorder was stronger than I was. And things took a downward spiral. After I got admitted to a medical floor 2 weeks after, I woke up one day at 3 a.m. and I could not breathe. It turns out that my body was so underweight that it had eaten away at my diaphragm, which is the muscle that allows you to breathe, so I could no longer breathe on my own. I got sent to the ICU and I was intubated there. Intubated means you can no longer breathe on your own, you're on life support, you're on a breathing tube. Right after that, they ran blood tests on me and found out that my kidneys had failed. I was dehydrated, I was too thin. I either needed dialysis or a kidney donation. So they did dialysis on me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was obviously too much life support for my body to handle, so they sedated me in the ICU. And I was asleep for a month, the month of May. I believe it's 3 years ago. I don't remember anything that happened that entire month. All I remember is when the medications that they were giving me would wear off, I would wake up and I would see my mom and my dad and my sister just like they were saying, it's okay. And I would want so bad to speak to them, but I couldn't because I was intubated. And I was tired, I didn't know what was happening, and I wanted it all to end. And for the brief moment that I would be awake, I was horrified that I would be losing my life at 19 years old because of an eating disorder. And I had already completed my first year of nursing. I knew that I had so much ahead of me, but I didn't know where it was going. Finally, after the month, the nurses kind of shook me one day, harder than usual, and they were like, wake up, we think you can breathe on your own. I believe this is a miracle. My family is very religious, and they were always by my side. They were always there for me, praying for me. And they extubated me. They took the breathing tube out, and I could breathe. I could breathe on my own. I was also getting feedings by an NG tube, by the way, so I was gaining weight while I was sedated. I believe it was 3 weeks later, they saw that my kidneys were starting to recover, which doesn't really happen after kidneys have failed, but I was doing well, and they discontinued the dialysis. I was discharged after that to the medical floor from the ICU, where I started to eat because I realized that things had to change. Eventually, after about a week on the medical floor, when I was stabilized, not weight restored, stabilized, I was sent home. And the day they sent me home, my mom and dad were furious, and they told the nurses, "How can you send her home? We don't know. We don't know what to do. She's going to go home. She's going to restrict again." And looking back now, yes, I mean, we were discharged home with nothing. I was put on the waiting list for the eating disorder program at the hospital, but waiting lists are very long, and the particular hospital that I was on the waiting list for had only 4 inpatient beds. So obviously it was going to take a while. Anyway, I went home and I tried my best to cooperate with my parents. I tried to eat. They were really long, dark days. There was lots of screaming at the table. There was lots of, "I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. You guys don't know what you're doing. Food is bad. You're going to make me fat." And I mean, looking back now, I mean, it's not funny. And the only reason I'm smiling is because if you can picture someone being so thin and so underweight and saying, "You're going to make me fat," and there's just a little meal in front of you, it's not rational. And that's the heart of eating disorders. They're not rational. They are mental illnesses, and I don't know how my family persevered through all of that, because you can imagine it's very difficult to see someone you love and to hear them screaming all these things at you, and you don't understand where this come from, and what am I going to do about it. Eventually, the waiting list, my turn came up, and I was admitted. It was an adult program. I stayed there. They obviously, I mean, they fed us, and they didn't leave us until we finished our meals. It was very strict. It was good because I had to eat. It was good because I gained weight. There was some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, involved as well. The one issue I probably would have with the program was I wasn't encouraged to really take control of it and to understand what I could do. There came a point when I was actually turned against my family at the program, being told, well, if you don't like it here, you don't have to go home. You can find a house elsewhere. You don't have to listen to your parents. And I believe they wanted to do that to kind of make me take responsibility for it and to engage me in it. I don't think that was the right technique because I was so involved with my family previously that saying that made me rebel even more. There were also other incidents, such as other patients being triggers for me, waking up in the middle of the night and my patient next to me would be exercising. There were many patients who teased me in the program, who teased me because my family visited me every night and they didn't like that. Teased me because, for various reasons, and I couldn't take it anymore. I signed myself out of the program. Obviously, my parents were not happy with this either. But this time I was determined. I was determined to get better. And I went home and I did everything I could. I sat down and I told my family, you know what, I'm going to do this, but you have to let me go back to school. And by then this was August, so I was admitted into the ICU in April, and that was just a couple of months after in August. And they said, there's no way, you're not going back to school. And I said, well, if I eat, will you allow me to go back to school? And they were like, okay, but you have to get monitored with the doctor, you have to get your weight checked, you have to do this right. And I'm sure they were very scared, but they knew how much it meant to me. And they let me, and I did very well. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I remember telling my parents, I hated when I would sit down with my parents at the table, and I would be eating, and it would be screaming. I hated feeling like I was hurting them. I knew it wasn't me, I knew it was the eating disorder, but I hated seeing their pain. So I told them, if you just make me the food, I'm going to sit and I'm going to eat. And I did. I sat down at the kitchen table maybe like 6 or 8 times a day, and I finished my meals. And after my meals, I would be angry and I would scream. So I would find outlets. I would write. We would play a board game. I would watch TV. And Disney Junior became my favorite TV show. It really did, and it's great stuff. And sorry, flip to the next slide. something that I believe is crucial is the family support. I can imagine that my family was horrified that I was eating, but I didn't. And I gained weight, I continued to be monitored. I did go back to school in September. I now completed my nursing degree in December, so I'm writing my licensing exam soon, so I'll be a registered nurse soon. And I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to tell people about my story, this near-death experience, and how I was able to turn it around, and to just take my nursing experience as well as, I saw it from both ends. I saw it from the end of being a patient, and now I see it from the end of being a nurse. And I realized that there are major gaps in the system. My sister is a teacher. My father is a family physician. I see in their careers the gaps as well. There are major gaps in all of society, and these are gaps that are not impossible to fill, but will take unified efforts to do so. I started a blog to tell people about my journey, and it really gained a lot of people reading it, talking about mental health, raising awareness about healthy lifestyle in general, debunking myths such as gluten-free or vegan and all that stuff, and really using evidence to show people with these things. And that's something I believe in. There's a lot of stuff you can find out on the internet or from people, but if it's not evidence-based, it means nothing. So on this blog, after it gained a lot of excitement, I started thinking, well, I'd love to write. Wouldn't it be great if I wrote a book? And I did. And it took a long time for me to find a publisher because, according to the publishers who said no to me, nobody cares about eating disorders. Nobody wants to hear about this. But it gained popularity, particularly because I put a lot of food puns in my book. Like you guys saw on the first slide, food puns are fun. They're cheesy, they're corny, but they're fun. And just letting people know about my journey and about how you can make a difference. And my book, Recipe for Recovery, has been one of the greatest accomplishments, I think. It's gained lots of coverage. I have some here for purchase if anyone's interested. If not, they'll be available in stores by next month. It's $20. And again, just spreading awareness and raising advocacy. And I've listed a bunch of bullets on the previous slide. We don't have to go to them, but something that I hope you can take away from this is that as a parent, as a community member, as a teacher, if you have maybe an opinion that someone might be struggling, go with it. Go with your gut. Because more than likely, you're right. And if you're not right, well then, hey, you were wrong, but you raised awareness somehow. It's never wrong to maybe approach someone, or if you can't approach the person struggling, approach the parents, approach someone of higher authority, and let them know. And in general, just when we're living in society, I think my family can attest to this, we've learned so much about how we approach food. We've learned, yes, dessert is good. We've learned there's no such thing as good or bad food. We've learned if you're bad, you still eat your dinner before you go to bed. That is not punishment. We've learned that exercise is healthy in moderation. There's a lot of attitudes, say healthy minds, healthy body, healthy attitudes that we have to change. One of the ones is acceptance of all body sizes and looking at your body not in terms of good or bad, fat, thin, of what it can do for you. And that was something major that I learned to accept. I learned to accept my body because it's strong. And when I used to be doing my clinical rotations, if I didn't have a strong body, there was no way I was training my patients. There was no way I was getting to my clinical rotations. There was no way I was even waking up from bed. And that's really my journey and my experience. And I really hope that something that the message I can spread to people is eating disorders are real, they're mental illnesses, but they are 100% treatable. Recovery is 100% possible. Today I'm doing very, very well, eating all my meals, eating all my sugars, everything, and I'm very receptive to feedback from my family, open communication, ongoing, and realizing that getting help and realizing that you need help is okay. And once I came to terms with that, I realized that it's okay to need help and it's necessary to get help when you need it. So thank you for coming out, thank you for listening, thank you to my family, thank you to NEDIC, and I really hope that this has helped, and if you have any questions at the end, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you.